Okay, so thank you for coming to the third in a series of Farmers' Voices Matter with the National Farmers Union Ontario. This session is on the topic of non-quota ungraded eggs. In particular, it stems out of a resolution that came to the NFU-O convention floor a year ago in March, which called for the NFU-O to work towards trying to raise the limit of laying hens without interfering with the quota system beyond the current 100 bird limit, as well as push to have it legal to sell ungraded eggs at farmers markets. So tonight we're going to talk a bit about those issues and following our two presenters with an idea towards what are the steps we need to take as an organization, who are the allies we need to work with to try to improve the situation for all of our farmers with hens so that they can make a viable, dignified living off of their farm work. So to start, we've got two great presenters tonight who are going to give us some background on what research has been done in Ontario and what has been done elsewhere. So normally we are really open-ended with questions and stuff, but because I think this is such a heated topic, what we're going to do is let our presenters present first, and once they're finished, we'll open the floor to questions directly related to their presentations, and then we will have our generative discussion about what are our next steps. Okay, so that being said, let me introduce our two panelists for this evening. The first speaker tonight is Kristie Schertzer, and she's the Executive Director of Direct Farm Manitoba, a nonprofit cooperative supporting Manitoba farmers markets and small-scale producers. Kristie has worked in the sector for over 10 years, working on a variety of projects, including the development of Direct Farm Manitoba's Manitoba Community Food Currency Program, a sector building initiative supporting food security and directly benefiting local producers that connects food insecure households across Manitoba with fresh farm food at their local farmers market. In addition to her work with farmers markets and farmers, Kristie was a member of the provincial government relations team for the Farmers for Climate Solutions and also sits on the board of Canadian Farmers Markets. So Kristie's going to present, and then our second speaker tonight, who I'll introduce now as well, is Pat Learmonth, who founded Farms at Work in 2010. Farms at Work is now a charity whose mission is to support the growth of resilient, thriving farms that contribute to community food security in East Central Ontario. Pat and Farms at Work have written and contributed to a variety of studies on issues surrounding the barriers to success for new entrants and small farms. In 2016, Farms at Work carried out extensive research to understand the market for eggs in East Central Ontario and whether access to community egg grading stations would improve success for non-quota farms. Pat holds a BA in Environmental Studies from Trent University and a degree in law from the University of Western Ontario. She and her husband own a farm near Peterborough. All right, so those are our two great presenters, and I'm going to pass it over right now to Kristie to share a little bit about what they've been doing in Manitoba around these issues.
Great, thanks a lot, Dave. And it's nice, I can see one of our producers who just moved from Manitoba, one of our members who now is one of your members, I think, over there in Ontario, Victoria. Hi, Victoria. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm going to just share my slide deck here. It's pretty basic. When Dave first reached out, I was like, I don't think we have much to share. It's been kind of here and there and all over the place with our process. But yeah, I thought I'd just share a little bit about what we've been doing here in Manitoba. So can everybody see that okay? Yeah, great. Okay, so just a little bit about us. As Dave said, we're a not-for-profit cooperative, so we're a member-based co-op. We've been around since around 2007 as the Farmers Market Association, and then the NDP government launched in 2013 a small-scale food working group, and one of the things that came out of that was that small-scale producers in Manitoba didn't really have their own sector association. They couldn't get lumped in with the beef producers or the pork producers. Those are on a much larger scale. So our organization expanded. We changed our name to Direct Farm Manitoba, and now we represent both direct marketing farmers, which are generally small to medium scale, and farmers markets. So we wear both hats, which is unique in Canada. I think we're the only organization that does both things. So first, I thought we'd talk about our exemption numbers here in Manitoba. So I didn't really kind of know that prior to 1985, it was 499, which was interesting. I wish it was 499 again for layers. And then there was that gap of almost, I guess, 30 years where it went down to 99. And then in 2015, it went back up to 300. So that's our current number that our farmers can have under exemption limits. So mostly today, what I'm going to be talking about, because we weren't really a big part of those exemption limits being raised, a lot of that came out of that small scale working group, which many of our board members were on. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about the early steps. We all probably know that policy work is not like a straight and narrow. We don't like make this path and follow it, then we get the desired results. It's a lot of like starting and stopping and wearing other hats and putting out other fires, then coming back, and then you have a different government, then you have a different ag minister. We've been through, we started this with our current ag minister, who was our former ag minister in 2014. So we've been at it for 10 years. It's been a while, and it's not the only thing we've been doing, but it has been, I'm sure we brought it up to the minister in 2014. So it's been a while. So when I say it's a request to the current minister, I mean our current minister, who was our former minister. So one of the things we started by doing, which was just the jurisdictional scan, we looked at which provinces could have ungraded eggs at farmers markets. That was really our big thing, because we know as farmers markets, and we know that especially smaller scale farmers, new farmers, BIPOC farmers, like farmers markets are the best, lowest barrier entry point for people to enter the sector. And farm eggs are what bring people to farmers markets. If a farmers market has eggs, there's going to be more people to the farmers market because they come every week. It's an easy sell to say, you want more people to farmers market, get eggs at your farmers market. So it was a high priority for us because we knew it would serve both of our member types, our farmers and our farmers markets. So we did this scan and we looked at all the provinces to see if they had specific legislation around it, whether it was allowed. And then we also dug down into the exemption numbers and how each province defined farm gate, including Manitoba. So in Manitoba, from now what I'm understanding from talking to Dave, our farm gate, what that's defined as, you can see at the bottom of here, it's really producer to consumer. The location actually isn't that important as long as it's not at a retail store or a farmer's market. So 2 steps outside of the farmer's market, totally fine. At the farmer's market, not fine. So you can see that we found this to be fairly, anyways, not that helpful. So some of what we started was, at that point, we had local food specialists. Manitoba Agriculture had 4 of them. Went down to, then we had none, and now they're starting to build them up again. And I will say that right off, they were like, no can do. This is not like CFIA, this, and we had all these different regulations and why it wouldn't work. So I'd say our first thing was like, yeah, this isn't going to work, because that's sort of what we got told quite a bit. So then we went down the grading station. We had 2 different farm groups who were looking at mobile grading stations, what that could look like if they had to be graded to get to farmers markets, what would that look like? And really It was a total Manitoba. We're much more spread out than Ontario between farms, places you can do this, and it just wasn't feasible economically for farmers to do that. They wouldn't have enough. They'd have to raise the prices of the eggs too much. They're already not getting enough for their eggs. And it just, both those ideas, when they finally got to, one of them even went right through to kind of looking at different business models, and it didn't really happen. So I'd say at that point, we definitely paused a little bit. We were on with other things. So our continuing work, I'd say like we kept bringing this up at our yearly meetings with the minister, and then we also, I think, began to be more involved and be noticed as a sector organization. So they'd already known us as a farmers market organization. Then they were knowing us more as someone who was representing these farmers. They still, I mean, they're still thinking those are those little farmers, but COVID especially helped with that. And I would say we updated our jurisdictional scan, and then we continued with this relationship building. So just went to I'm sure you guys do this anyways. It's just how you do it, but you go to all the engagements, all the meetings, all the things. People started to know who we were. We got the Public Interest Law Center involved to see if there could be a case for consumer choice and whether we could say consumers are asking for this and we're not providing something like, and these regulations and policies are not providing consumers with the choice that they're looking for. Because it was the Public Interest Law Center, so it was pro bono, took a while, but we got to the point where we really didn't have enough to stand on to be able to take agriculture to court over that. So we just kept working on it. One thing is in Manitoba, the farmers markets are inspected by Manitoba Health, but the farmers are inspected by Manitoba Agriculture. It's quite a complex, like who gets who, and it's not super clear, often even to the people involved. It's gotten a lot clearer now. But so as we are working with Manitoba Agriculture, we are also meeting with Manitoba Health to make sure that both things were covered. And with doing this, we realized that the best thing would be to say, this is just exactly how you guys should do it. These are the regulations that need to be changed. These are the policy wordings that need to be changed. And this is how it can happen for you folks. And we gave a timeline, which was hugely, yeah, not reasonable. Anyways, but so our proposal was pretty basic. It wasn't like super complicated. We gave a good backgrounder again with all those reasons, like more economically sustainable sector. We did a new economic impact study on farmers markets, what people wanted. They want eggs, more people come. The farmers don't have good, all the arguments. Farmers don't have good risk management systems. Eggs are a wonderful way for people to diversify their farms. They can bring them anyways. We gave that timeline, proposed guidelines. We really looked at what BC Ag at that time, I'm not sure if they still are, but what they were doing, which was pretty much when we spoke to people we knew with what they were doing, and we felt like they were following really good guidelines. And I can share these with you folks. It was pretty, we just said, this would work for our producers. This is what a lot of them are doing already. It follows really good food safety. And I'd say within this same time too, our whole food safety legislation is being redone too. So it all has been happening all at the same time since 2021. So it did slow it down a little bit, but it did allow us to get in there while that was happening because it's becoming more outcomes based and we could really argue for that. So
that's been something that's missing for her.
And so the regulation wording changes were really basic. Basically, they just had to remove farmers market. That's like just that it could be sold everywhere. It could be not sold. It had to go to the end user, all those things. So we worked with them on that. And yeah. So where are we at currently? So I would say since the Conservative government and now we have an NDP government, so we've had a change of ag ministers, but I'd say this current ag minister and the last ag minister were completely on board with this. They said we're completely on board with eggs coming to farmers markets. It makes sense. It's reasonable what you're asking. It's just the logistics of inspections, getting those policies changed, working with the policy department and everything else that they have going on. So we were pretty excited when they said that, but that it does take time. So we've had a few years of there being no real things that they were against as far as this happening. Yeah, so I'd say currently we're actually working out the logistics. I can't really say anything. I'm not going to say anything till it's right out there, but they are going to be releasing soon, I think, a public response. That's what we do in Manitoba, an Engaged Manitoba survey. So folks can let them know how much they'd love to have farm eggs at farmers markets. And I'd say that's where we are currently, but I'd say something else that spurred this on and I think helped to move the needle forward is our Manitoba Community Food Currency Program. You can see a picture here of a community farmers market, but this program's a program. They have 3 of them in Canada. Manitoba, Nova Scotia has one, and BC has one. And we're pretty unique in Manitoba that agriculture funds our whole program. So they gave us just over $1 million over 3 years. And 76% of that money goes directly to food insecure households who can spend it like cash, these market bucks at the farmers market on only farm food. So agriculture is fully supporting this program in Manitoba through the SCAP funding. And because they're doing that, one of the most affordable proteins is eggs. So again, we could loop that argument back into this process with agriculture that this is a great program. It puts money directly in the pockets of smaller scale Manitoba producers, encourages food security, community building, but we need eggs to really make this really great. So I think that's something that's definitely encouraged the process to move a little more quickly now. And I'm crossing my fingers that we're at the final stages with this. Yeah, I was just yeah, one other thing I just wanted to add was I don't know if you guys follow stuff that goes on about this across the country, but I would say that in Manitoba, our policies tend to be similar to the other prairie provinces, and Saskatchewan has always allowed ungraded eggs at farmers markets. And just last week, they are putting through a new amendment that would not allow for ungraded eggs at farmers markets. It was being lumped in with a larger amendment, and farmers markets were being lumped in with retail stores and other places that have middlemen sellers that aren't direct farm to consumer. And I'm happy to say that yesterday it was announced that farmers markets are still exempt from that. So they won't be changing that. So that's good news for farm fresh eggs in Canada. And it's a good thing for you folks to probably be talking about when you're talking to your policymakers. I think those were the main things. I said I'd be under 10 minutes. Hopefully that happened. And I'd say those are the main things that yeah, I was going to talk about. I think we're going to have a Q&A, so I think people can ask me more questions then if they want.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Kristie, for sharing all the hard work you've been doing in Manitoba. It sounds like there's many initiatives there that we should be considering following in a similar vein in Ontario. We will, have questions come back to you, I'm sure, momentarily, but first we will pass it on to our second speaker tonight. Take it away, Pat Learmonth.
Thanks very much, David. I am going to be coming at this from a very different angle. I'm taking you back to a study that Farms at Work did back in 2016 and published in 2017. And we were coming at this from the perspective of community egg grading stations. Laura, next slide. So basically what we were trying to do was explore and analyze the feasibility of creating 1 or more community egg grading stations in our region, which is East Central Ontario. And our goal was to support small enterprises and to try to provide them with more opportunities to move eggs beyond the farm gate. So we did the research in 2016. We published in 2017. We were funded by the Ontario Trillium Foundation. And it was a really, I think we bit off more than we had realized at the beginning. In order to actually get to the goal line on our study, we ended up having to look at a lot of different material, which hopefully could be useful to people going forward at this point. Next slide. So this is just a diagram that is in the study that just sort of describes in Ontario the situation where, the three different ways in which eggs can be sold. And obviously on the left-hand side, we've got ungraded eggs, which can be sold directly to a customer at the farm gate. And my understanding is the definition of farm gate here really is farm gate, and that you're not even supposed to be delivering them to someone off-site. Unlike what we were just hearing about Manitoba. So the other option is on the far right-hand side that you can, if you have quota, you'll basically sell your eggs to a processor that grades them, and then they'll go off through the wholesale market. And in the middle, we've got this opportunity where if on farm or through a custom grading station, you can get your eggs graded, then it just opens up the world to you to be able to sell at the farmer's market or to be able to sell wholesale to stores, institutions, or restaurants. Next slide. So just quickly, we started off by looking at what is the market opportunity. And at that time, in talking to the Egg Farmers of Ontario and looking at various statistics, it was pretty clear that the overall demand for eggs was increasing in Ontario. And at that time, Egg Farmers of Ontario was saying that that demand was outstripping supply. And we also did consumer surveys in our region where we where we talked to people about their willingness and interest in buying local eggs and why they might be interested in doing that. And they told us that they were willing to pay a premium for local eggs, that they could buy direct or as locally as possible, and that they were interested in characteristics of the eggs that were not necessarily available at the grocery store and certainly not in 2016. Next slide. So then we went on to do really what was a completely different study in a way, which was the financial feasibility of running a community grading station. And I'm not going to bother going into the details of that, but we looked at different pieces of equipment and did a really full analysis. And it basically decided, well, you could run a community grading station, but that the big issue was the volume of eggs that you'd be putting through and where those eggs were going to come from. And as was pointed out earlier, how many producers are there within that geographic region that are going to be able to get to that grading station on a regular basis and build that cost into their cost structure. So suffice to say that community grading stations could work, but we felt that there were some roadblocks. Next slide. So basically, we ended up taking a look at the economics of producing eggs at different scales. And clearly, a lot of assumptions have gone into these analyses. And we actually have interactive worksheets where we can change all of the assumptions and rerun these numbers. These are the original numbers from 2016. And we looked at 100 layers, 500, 1,000, and 3,000. And included the cost of grading and also at $1 a dozen, and also the cost of the Egg Farmers of Ontario levy at that time, which was about 33 cents, I believe. We put in a $5.50 per dozen sale price, $15 an hour per wages, which is obviously very low. And you can kind of see what pops out the bottom here on these. The net income at 100 hens, you're losing $1,700. And as you can see that net income line improves enormously the more layers you can have. And the reason that we did this was just that we were hearing from all the farmers that we were talking to that we were asking them about their profitability, asking them about how they felt about having 100 hens and asking them if they were making money. And, you know, some were saying, yeah, we think so. And some were saying, we don't know. And some were saying no. So we thought, well, we better take a close look at this because we don't want to build a facility on a shaky foundation in terms of the economics of the people who are going to be using it. Next slide. So essentially, we were looking at the fact that, okay, minimal profitability if you're limited to 100 hens, regardless. And then if you had to pay to grade the eggs from the 100 hens, it just seemed like you were going to be losing money. And so our conclusion was that there was no point in setting up grading stations without the policy change. And we ended up making recommendations around policy change, which hopefully will contribute to this conversation, but are probably not the only recommendations that are possible. Next slide. So the three things that we kind of focused on in that study were, of course, the increase in non-quota flock size to at least 500 hens, based on that analysis we just looked at. Second, reducing the steps in the grading process to be able to reduce the cost of grading. And third was exemption from the levy. So the assumption we were making was that grading would happen. Whereas obviously the other argument could be that ungraded eggs could be more widely sold. Next slide. So in Ontario, we have a precedent, you know, for increasing non-quota flock size with the artisanal chicken program, which relates to meat chickens. And that work was done primarily by Sustain Ontario, and probably about a dozen years ago. I'm sure everybody on this call is familiar with it. And as far as I'm aware, it has been a successful program, and the chicken farmers of Ontario have been enthusiastic about the program. There also in Ontario is a whole thing where back in 1983, there were 500 hen flocks that were grandfathered, and those folks have been able to continue to operate without quota since 1983. At the end of 2016, there were 320 of them in Ontario. They are pretty constrained in terms of only being able to pass on that within their own families. So presumably over time, this number would be reduced. But just to say that we do have a significant number of flocks in Ontario that do not have quota and are at the 500 hen level. Next slide. The other thing that occurred to us was that in looking at the details of grading and looking at this equipment and what the whole process looked like, it seemed as though there were 4 steps in the grading process, and that candling, washing, and drying, you might argue, had to do with health concerns, whereas the grading for size really was something that maybe was extremely important in the larger commercial and industrial kind of system. But that maybe that particular step in grading really didn't have that much relevance when you were talking about small flocks. And so would it help to reduce the cost of grading if you actually could get rid of step 4? And is there equipment out there that would even accommodate that? And I don't know the answer to that question. I'm just throwing out the idea. Next slide. And the final thought that we had was around the levy. Because the purpose of the levy that EFO collects, Egg Farmers of Ontario collects on graded eggs, is to fund this program where if there's surplus egg production in the province, they get rid of those eggs and put them into the processing stream. And so it just doesn't seem as though that levy has any relationship to the kinds of situations that we're talking about at all. And so I think you could make a good argument that it should not be something that should have to be paid with small custom or on-farm grading stations. And there are grandfathered grading stations in the province in the same way that there are grandfathered flocks of hens, and they don't pay the levy. And the problem is that if you go to those on-farm grading stations that are grandfathered and ask them to do custom grading for you, they won't do it because they will lose their exemption from the levy if they do any custom grading for anybody else. That's part of the rules that they have to live by. Next slide. So from our point of view, what we were looking for back then was for policy organizations in Ontario to work together and to try to get some progress made so that there were more opportunities for small flock producers. And then we could revisit the question of whether custom egg grading stations would be a useful tool. And to us, the obvious policy organizations would be the 3 general farm organizations listed and Sustain Ontario. All of those organizations are policy organizations. And as I mentioned earlier, Sustain Ontario successfully led the artisanal chicken changes that happened in the province. Next slide. You can read the full study that I'm talking about by going to our library, and we also have an interactive spreadsheet around measuring profitability in individual operations where you can change all the numbers. We have spreadsheets, many spreadsheets that relate to this study, and I believe we still have them all and that they might be useful for people who are pursuing this from a policy point of view if they were updated. And I think there's just the last slide, which just says, oh yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, which just says who we are, and feel free to contact us if you want to talk about this further, and feel free to take a look at the study on our website. Did I manage to stay within my 10 minutes, Laura?
You were fantastic.
Good.
Perfect. Yeah, so I'm just going to hit stop now here. We're going to stop the recording.